didn't end with the slaying of the 300 at Thermopylae. It began. It didn't end with the slaughter at Sand Creek. It began. It didn't end with the fall of the Alamo. It began. It didn't end at Ford's Theater. It began. It didn't end at Pearl Harbor. It began. It didn't end at the Lorraine Hotel. It began. It didn't end on 9/11. It began. And here and now, you arrogant and ignorant, evil and foolish, traitors and enemies, foreign and domestic, nothing is ended. You have awakened the American giant and filled us with terrible resolve. Your masks won't silence us. Your shutdowns won't stop us. Your riots don't scare us. You're not as disciplined as the British. You're not as organized as the Nazis. You're not as fierce as the Imperial Japanese. You're not as brutal as ISIS. We beat them all. Freedom is never given. It is earned. It is won. It is fought for. It is taken. So take it. The gun is not the answer. You are. The gun is a tool in a toolbox of tactics, techniques, and practices for protecting and providing life. Trump's is not the answer. We are. Trump saw our political dissatisfaction and rallied to us. We rewarded his hard work and dedication with 2 presidential wins. We gave him the presidency, but Israel gave him a Torah crown, reserved for the Messiah. Trump is not the Messiah. Yeshua is. But Likud Israelis say Trump is, not Jesus. American Christian Zionists fund the Third Temple while trashing their own tabernacle with burgers, beer, and bioweapons. Trump is Israel, not America first. He covers for a Mossad agent Epstein's child rape list. He concurs with IDF's Gaza genocide. Bibi brags that when he says bomb, Trump drops, like a wimpy wife who ignores a daughter-abusing dad to preserve a marriage lie. As Fox, Newsmax, and CNN refuse to show Pedo Joe's fondling children, MAGA cultists refuse to see the terrible truth of Trump. He may be Israel's, but he is not our savior. They may have Trump, but they do not have us. Trump will soon be gone, but we will still be here. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jeff Prather. This is the Prather Point, and that's the old intro that I used to use a long time ago, taken back. So let me know how you like that. I think it's really cool to have that back going again. Lots to cover today. Going to jump right into that. Trump is bad, but Biden was worse. Why the CIA courts trannies. U.S. debt hits $40 trillion. Trump, the U.S. is going to leave NATO. U.S. grabs $4 billion of Venezuelan gold. Comcast Wi-Fi motion is worse than Flox. The U.S. runs stealth operation to transport oil through Hormuz. And HHS has rescued 137,000 of the 375 kids trafficked under Pedo Joe. And then hopefully my old friend Bud Malmstrom, founding father of American Bujinkan, will be in guessing. So let's jump right in. So getting started here. Long after Pence was gone from Team Trump, he was still describing the trans movement as this radical gender ideology. He openly opposed trans military service. He backed restrictions. He insisted over and over there were only 2 genders. But a news story from The Atlantic has dropped. It all started with a trans CIA officer who goes by the name of Julia Curley. He went public with an extraordinary story about Pence. Now, for those of you who know, Pence has long been known to be a homosexual and a pedophile in D.C., even though he's on a Christian university. He purports himself to be a Christian, but that is certainly not the case. According to this transgender CIA officer, one of the most famously socially conservative politicians in America, didn't just tolerate them, he affirmed him and had a special relationship with him. He even brought this guy's mom to the White House. Many years before the Pence relationship unfolded, Curley was already writing about his transgender identity, the CIA, and the bigger movement. Back in 2017, Curley wrote another essay for The Atlantic under the pseudonym Jenny Hall. Curley confirmed in his new piece that he was Hall and that the earlier essay was about his experience transitioning while working at the CIA. Can you imagine that? I couldn't even get my teeth fixed because I was deploying so much. I realized the idea that I'm ISIS's nightmare, trans, gay, Jewish, CIA, and worst of all, female. Not sure that's a nightmare for them. I think that's more of a dessert. 2017 issue celebrated the CIA's acceptance of transgender employees. I remember these commercials. Maybe you do too, which I found amazing because one of the main things it used to be with CIA was if you were homosexual, not that they weren't, but if you were found out homosexual, you could be blackmailed. And therefore you couldn't get in. This was the old days, of course, my time as well. But while Curley was fighting the trans war from one side, Pence was publicly standing firm on the other side. And this is where we see the uniparty. So yes, I will get to some things are better under Trump than under Pedo Joe, but neither was in charge and remains in charge. Mike Pence made it clear that he would ban transgender troops. He called it a radical gender ideology. But after January 6, 2021, Pence invited his former Daily Brief staffer back to the West Wing for a farewell photo, said he became emotional, said he'd never been prouder. Because remember, J6 is the moment when Pence's relationship changed. And this is, of course, run by the deep state through the FBI, the deep state, the Praetorian Guard, puppet masters. So now we have a transgender CIA official plotting Trump for certifying an election that at least half the country thought was a fraud. Everybody knows it was a fraud. Curley's very critical of Trump's second term. Well, I agree with him on that. But he thought that he would get fired by the Trump administration. Evidently, he did not. And again, that's my point here. Yeah, Pedo Joe's administration was worse than Trump's, but neither was in charge. The deep state runs it. The Praetorian Guard puppet masters run both. They run the CIA, they run the FBI, and they are part of the global cabal, as in Kabbalah, which is mainly out of Israel. And for those who don't recall, Janissaries were the elite soldiers of the Turkish Ottoman Empire who conquered the entire Balkans and Near East during the 15th and 16th centuries. And partly they used the same tactics as the transgender movement is using. The most famous trait of the Ottoman Janissaries was their unusual method of recruitment. New Janissaries were made through the devshirme, literally collecting, in which Ottoman officials went into provinces, took boys aged roughly 8 to 15 away from their families and brought them back to Constantinople for training as soldiers. In a major twist, though, the boys were recruited, not taken from Turkish families or Muslim groups. Instead, they were taken from conquered Christian peoples. And this is very typical. You see this with African child soldiers happen, where they often even have to kill their own parents to be part of the African army. And in most of the world, a teenage boy is a fighting age soldier, not in wimpy America, although there are, of course, exceptions to that. But it got so absurd that around 2012, CIA recruiters were actually showing up at Pride events to talk about careers. So think about this. It used to be Ivy League, where you speak a lot of languages, you're a world traveler, you're rich, and now they're going to Pride events. If you wonder why the CIA is so ineffective, there you go. CIA spent years marketing itself as a welcoming place for LGBTQ recruits. But of course, this was ironic because being even a homosexual is something that could get you blackmailed, and therefore you weren't material as a case officer. And basically, that's what the agency revolves around. The stars are the case officers, the recruiters, or in the DIA's case, they go to the same school, the farm, Camp Perry, it's tactical agent handler. But those are the stars there.
So why, per an ex-CIA whistleblower, John Kirchhoff, CIA wants these types? Well, they want them because they are not quite sociopaths, but they have sociopathic traits. And because they have sociopathic traits, they are flawed human beings, as in fallen human nature, and they can be controlled and manipulated. So they all even want to control their own case officers, and that's really the real problem. And again, I've talked about how, and I've tried to get Hector Perez to come on. I left a message from the other day. It looks like he doesn't want to come on. He says, you know a lot about the DIA and what happened. I'm not sure why he doesn't want to come on. I'm just seeing a note that Bud will not be able to make it work today, so that's too bad. Oh well. Okay, no worries. Anyway, so that just shows the depraved state of the CIA and the intelligence community. There's even a series out on MK Ultra. If you watch it, you see all kinds of bizarre drug use and sexual use and torture going on. And at first I thought, well, this is stupid. But then I looked into it and I'm like, oh no, this is what it was, because the CIA recruits people with sociopathic tendencies to control them. And then, of course, the guys at the top are very sociopathic. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, working on a competitive intelligence project, consultation project, which is stuff you never see, where, I've seen this Lioness show, which I'm a big Taylor Sheridan fan. But of course, the Yellowstone wasn't what real ranching is like. And Lioness is not like what the CIA or the ground branch of the CIA is like through the Special Activities Division. I think it's now called Special Activities Group. But again, I know those guys. I have spoke at the farm. I'm familiar. I've worked with the Special Activities Group guys, had some of them on the show before, Dale Comstock. And they like to compare themselves to soldiers, but then they kidnap somebody, then they torture somebody. Well, that's not, if they're soldiers, there's rules of war that you have to go by, and you can't just do that. And the CIA does not do that. They just do whatever they want. In fact, John Kirchhoff went to prison for whistleblowing against the CIA's torture program. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say you're a soldier and you're fighting a war and you're in an army, it's just a clandestine or covert army, and then not abide by those standards. But that's the way they like to do it. But that shows how schizophrenic and sociopathic they are. And I got a note from somebody, an old colleague of Pierre, because last show I was talking about how when I was decided to get out of DEA, I was going to go either Delta or DEA. I was already pretty broken. As an officer, wouldn't get to stay there long anyway. If I made the selection, if my body survived it, which probably wouldn't have, looking back now, DEA welcomes me because of the snowcap program. I just come from Central America. I just went back. I was everything that the Operation Snowcap program was looking for. You can see my Operation Snowcap hat up there, my green beret on the other side, because I was in 7th Special Forces Group. In fact, some of the 18 Deltas, the medics that I had worked with in 7th Group, deployed with them, were now contract medics to the snowcap program. So, it wasn't much of a switch there for me to do that. That was very appropriate. But when I was talking to Hector Perez about coming on, he says, well, I'm going to do another episode with Prime, which I'm really happy about. I knew the same people. They were my racks, Billy Terrazas right now, God bless him, and his son watches. Sometimes he's got cancer, Ernie Lowe. We knew all the same people. Frank White, who recruited me for snowcap. And then the big story was that Kiki was not killed for the Buffalo Ranch marijuana burn, which was just another marijuana burn. It wasn't even his case. His CI flew over it. He didn't even fly over it. He was burned because he found out about Oliver North's training the Contras in Mexico. And that's why Felix Rodriguez, who was the big CIA operative during the Cuban Bay missile crisis, was there, because he was virulently anti-communist. And so I've been trying to get him on. He doesn't seem to want to come on. Or he's an older guy too, just like Bud. They have trouble with the electronic aspects So I guess that won't come on, but I still believe his story, and I wish him well. His book is out, Last Narc, and of course that's the Amazon Prime special that made me cry. Anyway, that's what's happening. But I wanted to point that out about the CIA, and unfortunately, but didn't. He says should have done this yesterday. He's probably saying that to me, whereas he could have got on and checked out his computer stuff. But when you get older folks on. But anyway, Bud is the founding father of the American Bujinkan. Of course, Stephen Hayes was the first to bring the Bujinkan and Hatsumi Sensei to America, who is the Soke, the father. A lot of people translate it as grandmaster, but it's actually father of the Bujinkan, which means warrior spirit school or divine warrior hall. After he's the first 15th Dan, he held more taikais, great gatherings, which would Hatsumi Sensei would come over every year at the CNN Center. He and his first wife, who has passed, he's remarried happily. I'm glad for him. Bonnie was really close with Kimitsuda Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei's wife, who has also passed. He held more taikais than anybody else. He had the biggest dojo in America for a long time. He stayed at my house. I've stayed at his house. He is very, very experienced on all of that. But anyway, I was hoping to get him on and catch up because I've known him for 45 years. And I tried calling him, didn't answer. So maybe we'll try another time. But unfortunately, he is not going to make it today. But anyway, to get on with why the CIA courts trannies now. But of course, they are much less effective than they were. Right after World War II, the OSS was the CIA inherit. Two things came out of the OSS: the Office of Strategic Services, which was based upon the British SOE, Special Operations Executive, which was OSS and Special Operations Executive were military organizations with civilians. When the OSS goes away with Wild Bill Donovan, Army Special Forces are created and the CIA is created. Army Special Forces, as you know, has done great. CIA has never done great, despite what everybody says all the time. Good afternoon, Drop Hammer. Give me some of that. John Guess, all my loyal guys on all the time. But the DIA was created, and I was DIA credentialed while I was simultaneously DEA, special agent credentialed. And that was a better organization because it was military based. So there was much more of a professional attitude there. But anyway, wanted to show you how the CIA has fallen even further and become even more infested there. And I was drinking my Stay Brewed coffee this morning. You get your Team America coffee.com. Got my Stay Brewed cup out there. Used my masculine man roll-on deodorant this morning, which is great stuff. And my patch wasn't sticking. I've got to get a new adhesive back. This is the adhesive back that comes with the patches. So I couldn't put that on my aching shoulder. So I ended up putting on some of Nessa's hemp oil on it right before the show. And that really did the trick. So that kind of covers all of my sponsors there that, yeah, I'm actually using all that stuff. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I did spray on my hypochlorous acid from Curative Bay today, on my remaining skin stuff. Probably can't see that. It's getting all better now, but that's working great as well. Unless I have a meeting, I'll always be here. Well, God bless you, John Guest, for that. I really appreciate that so much. Remember also, you can follow me at patreon.com/Jeffrey Prather at the $5, $15, or $25 level. I just posted a new hostage rescue disarmament technique the other day. That was pretty cool if you're at the Point Patriot level. Or if you just want the curated news stories, you can always just go to jeffreyprither.locals.com. And I also did a little blast out on Patreon called Warning Order Wednesday, little short live show as well. But anyway, getting back to what's going on, the national debt on Wednesday surpassed a record $40 trillion. So there's no way to pay this off, even though we're taking Venezuela's $4 billion in gold. This is because of defense costs, social programs like Social Security and Medicare, but really it's because of the interest on the debt. The U.S. hit a record $39 trillion in March. It reached $38 trillion 5 months before that in October, which means the debt is increasing in speed. The unprecedented $40 trillion figure highlights competing administration priorities: more defense spending, six-month-old war in Iran, cost of gas and groceries, and Kush Desai. What kind of name is Kush Desai? Sounds like he's from the Kush, Afghanistan or something. Has been focused on slashing waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. Now we got rid of Doge. However, experts say the exploding debt and latest record milestone are already affecting Americans' pocketbooks by raising borrowing costs for things like mortgages and cars, lowering wages from businesses that have less money available to invest, and creating more expensive goods and services. So what's that mean? That means that everything is going to be more expensive for the middle class, and it's going to be less valuable. Everything that you own is going to be less valuable. So what's that mean? That means put your savings into hard physical assets, such as gold that you have. I've already talked about that on previous shows, not gold stocks, not something that somebody else holds someplace else. And I'll get to what happens when Venezuela said, we want to repatriate our gold. But land, things that have hard value, because the U.S. currency is continuing to decline in value. The U.S. Treasury market is in free fall, and the diesel to crude gap is bigger now than ever. Michael Peterson, CEO of the Peterson Foundation, a think tank focused on U.S. fiscal challenges, says if we want to improve our living standards today and for the next generation, now's the time for lawmakers to put our nation on a more affordable and sustainable path. Of course, they have no intention of doing that at all. So the nation's leaders spent more money than it collects in taxes. In recent memory, the multi-year COVID-19 pandemic psyop shut down much of the U.S. economy, where the federal government borrowed heavily during President Trump's first term and under former President Joe Biden to stabilize the economy and support a recovery. So America's republic is clearly fallen, and the empire is failing, and it is on purpose and by design. It's not by accident. And this is what happens always and you can read again, Sir John Glubb's Fate of Empires. They always last about 250 to 275 years before selflessness for the empire or the state or the nation is replaced by selfishness. And we are in that stage. The first founders living hard, giving up everything. Then their kids have it a little easier. Then their kids have it a little easier. Then their kids have it a little easier. This is the old hard men make good times. Good times make soft men. Soft men make hard times. But this is really all by design. This could be fixed. All of it could be fixed. They don't want to fix it. They are purposefully destroying it because the deep state, the Praetorian Guard puppet masters are running it into the ground because they are in turn controlled by the global Kabbalist, as in Cabal, which is mainly the Israeli Licudists, the Israelists, the greater Israelists. Why is that? Because that's the synagogue of Satan, because eventually this is controlled by principalities and powers, and it is sourced satanically. So the debt curve is going asymptotic. I don't even know what that means. You're going to have to tell me what that means there. Give me some of that. But the point is that monies are going to continue to become less and less valuable, paper currency. You're going to need more of it eventually, like the Weimar Republic or something, truckloads of it to buy a loaf of bread. And you want to have your currency for what it's worth still into hard assets such as gold, such as bullets, such as land, such as cattle, all of that as well. Pema, from 2021 to 24, Michael Gunn reported from the Darien Gap how organized the NGOs in China was in helping millions of illegals get here. When you worked the border, did you see these strategic points? Oh yeah, I worked the border for 10 years as a DEA special agent from 1990 to 2000. I worked the Darien Gap when I was with 7th Special Forces Group from 85 to 89. But I did not see those NGOs in China had not organized at that time. Those camps did not exist back in my day. I once found a Chinese kid in a lockup with a bunch of Mexican dopers who somehow been separated from his Chinese father and got him out of that lockup. But no, I did not see any of that back in my day. So from the mid 80s to the 90s, I was with 7th Special Forces or 4th PSYOPs Group throughout Central America, Honduras, on the border of Nicaragua, sometimes in South America, in Chile. And then in the 90s, I went back as a DEA special snowcap operator to Central America, Guatemala, Honduras again, Belize, and also South America, quite a bit, Bolivia. And it was Special Forces in South America, Chile as well. My dad is retired DEA, if you knew him. A Guest during that time, Major, that was likely him. What with John Guest? Actually, that name does sound familiar to me. If he was around, worked Tucson or Yuma or Nogales or Phoenix or Mazatlan, I probably knew him. I was really, again, looking forward to getting Hector on, but he says he only wants to do personal interviews, and then he said he wanted to wait because he's doing another special. It's always interesting when people don't want to come on. I think with Bud, it was just, not paying attention to the technology. But there are others who don't come on, anymore, or some who would come on, like Clay Clark doesn't come on anymore, or General Flynn, when he would come on, he would do a very short segment, so he couldn't get a lot of questions asked, or if I wanted to ask him about certain questions, he'd say, no, I don't want to talk about that as well. But there's a lot of folks who won't come on now. And that list seems to be growing. And it's interesting to me. Joe Kent won't come back on, which is interesting to me, even though, again, I support, Joe Kent. I'm still a supporter. I don't agree with him, but I'm a supporter of Clay Clark because he did a lot for me as well. There's people I don't want to have back on. George Webb, who is, on video supporting Mossad and Israel and saying we should invade Karg Island. But it's always interesting, people who don't want to come on. I think some have legitimate reasons, and then some, it's very telling that they don't want to. But Trump has announced that we're going to be withdrawing from NATO, citing the European allies' refusal to support the U.S. war on Iran, and in particular, Turkey. Now, Turkey, yes, is a member of NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024, the NDAA of 2024, prohibits a president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO without a 2/3 Senate majority or act of Congress. Now, that's something I should have asked Davis Yance about when he was on, because that's a decision of the commander-in-chief, and yet to declare war is reserved constitutionally for Congress, which is why nobody declares war anywhere. That'd be an interesting topic to have asked Davis. Should have thought of that. But he's saying they're going to withdraw. And while he's previously threatened to leave the alliance, and he called it a paper tiger in 2026, experts note that any formal withdrawal would likely face immediate legal challenges and require congressional approval. Probably, I believe that's true because that's not it's not an active war anyway. He's not acting as commander in chief. This is a strategic alliance, but I'm not really sure about that. Give me some of that. Says asymptote is a point on an xy axis where at the x value, the function of y, debt level, versus time, x, goes vertical without ever reaching the limiting x value. Oh my God, my audience is so smart. They are smarter than me. An asymptote is a point on the x-y axis where at the x value, the function of y, debt level, versus time, x, goes vertical without ever reaching the limiting x value. Okay. Not sure I understand that. I'd love to get an economist on here to talk about that. But basically, our economy is in deep trouble because they have destroyed the value of it. That's why we went off the gold standard as well. But returning to the issue of leaving NATO, I'm fine with leaving NATO. I'm fine with leaving the UN. But the real reason Trump is doing this, it looks like, is because Turkey is part of NATO. And Turkey may or may not be, it is reported, hosting, sending troops or military assets to Syria to be used against Israel. So you get the news clearly that Iran struck 2 UAE tankers, but the story is more confusing. I talked about this on my little Wednesday warning order spot, but it is, the intelligence is still doubtful whether Turkey is actually sending assets and troops into Syria to be used against Israel. But Israel certainly wants to take on Turkey. They've made that clear next. And that will be akin to taking on Iran. And remember, Israel is not taking on Iran. Israel isn't doing anything. Israel is not going to have any of their troops die, as we have already had our soldiers die for this useless war. Are they going to convince us to do the same thing for Turkey? I don't know. But I think it's fine to leave NATO. I don't think it's fine to leave NATO so that we can then go to war with Turkey for Iran, or go to war with Turkey for Israel, as we are with Iran. And that is very concerning. Give me some of that. The curve goes straight up. I got it. I see what you're saying. I'd also like to hear your comments on leaving NATO and Turkey as well, because I know some of you guys are vets as well. But anyway, that's my position, is fine to get out of NATO, not fine to get out of NATO, so that we can get into yet another war with Turkey while we're still engaged with Iran, and Israel sits it out on the sides, enjoying the carnage. Lots of good reaction from the show with Nathan Glover. He certainly knows his stuff. That is very true. But talking about the debt, the U.S. is grabbing $4 billion of Venezuelan gold. And this is interesting. This is worth talking about. The remaining 31 metric tons of Venezuelan gold reserves will be confiscated from the Bank of England by the U.S. Treasury Department. Venezuelan sovereign gold reserves held by the Bank of England are set to be released and placed under U.S. Treasury Department management. So now, I am not really that expert on this, but supposedly there was some gold in the Twin Towers. I think there was supposed to be a CIA or Mossad center in Building 7. but the gold had been removed from the Twin Towers. And so what that comes down to is, Smedley Butler War is a racket, is they're just very big time thieves. So following recent U.S.-backed talks between the acting Delcy Rodriguez government of Venezuela and representatives of the defunct opposition majority parliament elected in 2015, the two sides agreed to work together to secure the unfreezing of the 31 tons of gold worth around US $4.3 billion at current prices to support post-earthquake recovery efforts. Now that sounds good for a second, but listen closely. Ramon Lopez, a member of the opposition delegation, disclosed that the resources would be deposited in a U.S. Treasury bank account and be subjected to external audits. External audits by whom? What parties are going to be doing that? When the DEA was coming after me and I said, "You're coming after my religion, that's illegal," they brought in a third-party consultant and former ex-DEA agent, black guy, to evaluate, and he was paid by DEA, and guess what he found? So, John Guest, last few shows and guests have had a bigger live crowd on Rumble. Yeah, they have. That's very true. I'm glad to see that happening. Please like, share, and subscribe on Rumble, on X, and on my YouTube channel, JP Intel. I've stuck back on there, and I'm trying to stay on there. And of course, I need the financial support as well. I am not independently wealthy. So what happens here is the United States gets the entire remaining 31 metric tons of Venezuela's gold reserves, and Venezuela gets $4.3 billion in U.S. fiats deposited into a U.S. Treasury account to help with earthquake disaster relief. A few hours worth of U.S. deficit spending for 31 metric tons of gold, supposedly for earthquake relief. For those who may not remember, in 2011, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez ordered the repatriation of roughly 211 metric tons of the nation's gold reserves held at the New York Fed and the Bank of England back to Caracas. And I've worked Caracas. The move sent shockwaves through the Bank of England and New York Fed, who were rumored to have allegedly rehypothecated Venezuelans 211 metric tons of gold. Remember, I talked about rehypothecation recently on a cast and how it is illegal, but is often done because he who has the gold makes the rules. Chavez immediately became a global pariah to the world's leading banksters and central banksters who fought Chavez's effort tooth and nail. At that time, Venezuela held substantial gold reserve estimates, put total holdings around 365 tons, with roughly 211 tons stored abroad at such places as the Bank of England, JP Morgan Chase, Barclays, Standard Chartered. Chavez directed the Central Bank of Venezuela to repatriate the majority of these overseas holdings into Caracas vaults. Smart thing to do. Approximately 160 tons were successfully returned via multiple cargo flights between late November 2011 and 2012. A portion, around 31 to 50 tons in various accounts, was left at the Bank of England for potential international operations, which is typical that you have some gold overseas to secure when you are financially moving electronic monies. Chavez publicly described the action as a protective measure against global financial instability, which it is. It followed the 2008 crisis and 2011 U.S. credit rating downgrade. That is, Chavez looked at what happened in the United States, said, I don't want that to happen to Venezuela. Let's get our gold back here. The banksters in the U.S. Treasury and in the Bank of England had rehypothecated it, which is borrowing on it illegally, and they did not like that at all, and so they went after them, and finally they got Trump to go after them. So it was rumored, but obviously never proven among alternative news sources, that Chavez's death from cancer less than 2 years later in 2013 may have been orchestrated by the global banking cabal in retribution for Chavez's gold repatriation order. The news that Trump administration is confiscating the remaining 31 metric tons of Hugo Chavez's gold reserves, not Hugo Chavez's, actually, it's Venezuela's, puts a final bookend on the gold story that could literally be a Tom Clancy novel. So remember my post and cast on rehypothecation. Now the Venezuelan op becomes even clearer. Oil, gold, and cover-up of illegal rehypothecation. And Venezuela gets worthless U.S. paper. And who might be the international auditors? Israel? I don't know. Maybe. But that is there are things worth fighting, killing, and dying for. My children, gold is not one of them. Further, Comcast Wi-Fi motion is now worse than FLOC. So there is some other good news, and that is there is a lot of pushback from FLOC. There are several sheriffs and police chiefs that are not going to use FLOC cameras. Of course, the deep state wants the FLOC cameras for surveillance, but there is already something emerging to replace the FLOC cameras that is much more malignant and difficult. The internet gateway in your living room is now a motion sensor. It's free of charge, and the data can go to law enforcement without further notice. And what goes to law enforcement is also going to the intelligence agencies. Remember, I've told you through open sources, even though I was dual credentialed with the DEA and with the DOD, with the DIA, DOJ, DEA, DOD, DIA. And so I had access to both at top secret levels. Is the DEA has early on developed a Title III wiretap basis from Colombia to the United States for cocaine traffickers. They could not afford it. The CIA took it over. And then eventually it came back into the DEA's Special Operations Group in DC. And on one side of the room now sits all the intelligence agencies that intercept SIGINT, signals intelligence, but then they will then pass that to all the federal law enforcement agencies, ICE, FBI, DEA, of course, Border Patrol, on the other side of the room and say, develop your own parallel probable cause. That is fruit of the poisonous tree. By definition, it's done all the time now. That's from open sources, Revolver, which I've talked about before. I'm not revealing any classified information there. But what's going to law enforcement is going to the intelligence surveillance deep state as well. On Tuesday, Comcast unveiled Xfinity Shield, a home security platform built entirely around the Wi-Fi network. It's not a shield. Yeah, that's why they call it a shield. Its centerpiece, Wi-Fi Motion, turns the leased gateway into a motion detector at no extra charge. Wi-Fi Motion works because a human body moving through a room disturbs the signal field, the electromagnetic field, between the gateway and the stationary connected devices like a printer or game console. While the feature is opt-in and according to Comcast rollout materials does not track phones or reach through Wi-Fi extenders, those limitations are choices Comcast made in software, not limitations of technology itself. Comcast says Wi-Fi Motion works without recording video, capturing images, or identifying individuals. The $15 a month tier Xfinity Shield Select adds AI-powered cameras that identify people, pets, packages, and vehicles. The free tier's restraint is line drawn one product SQOA. The company's own terms spell out where the data can go. Comcast may disclose information generated by your Wi-Fi to third parties without further notice. The true capabilities were laid out by researchers at Germany's Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KIT, in findings presented last November at the Computer and Communication Security Conference in Taipei. Using nothing but traffic from an ordinary Wi-Fi network, their system identified people with 95% accuracy in a study of 197 participants, regardless of viewing angle or how the person walked. That is changing the way you move your gait. That's part of when you change your identity, is you change your gait. Put a stone in your shoe, or shorten one shoe, lengthen one shoe. It's another tradecraft technique. The methods exploit beam forming, feedback information, BFI, housekeeping signals that every connected device sends back to its router so it can aim its transmission efficiently. Beam forming has shipped with consumer Wi-Fi hardware since Wi-Fi 5. Because this feedback travels unencrypted, anyone within radio range can read it. Person being identified does not need to be carrying a device at all. It is enough that the other people's nearby phones and laptops are talking to a router. This technology turns every router into a potential means for surveillance. Kit's Julian Taunt warned. He's described a scenario in which someone who regularly walks past a cafe running a Wi-Fi network could be recognized there later. One limitation provides a reality check. The system works only after it has been trained on a person's radio signature. The 99.5% accuracy figure applies to re-identifying enrolled participants, not identifying them. The standards process has already moved past the warning stage. In 2025. It was ratified, an amendment that deliberately builds sensitive capabilities of Wi-Fi, such as the presence detection, fall detection, and breathing monitoring, and early implementation are already appearing in silicon. While KIT team is urging for privacy standards, it runs entirely on beamforming features that have been deployed in consumer routers for over a decade. Meanwhile, the visible surveillance layer is an open retreat in America. So before I go on there, so let me explain that a little bit. So I have students who do Android phones, de-Googled phones. They use old TVs, not smart TVs. And of course, I advocate most of the time you're going to be surveilled. I advocate resistance in plain sight. I am not part of the redoubt movement that you go into a tower or you go into a anti-cyber tower, because it is really not possible. There's a telematics communications unit, TCU, in every vehicle. There's a black box in every vehicle. You got to take that out too. But what they're saying here is anybody near you will connect with you. And of course, if you go with targeted individuals, they're saying they identify everybody from the top of their electromagnetic head signature, their halo, their Pentecostal flame is what they are saying, which I'm not sure I buy that. The government is not all powerful. They just want you to think they're all powerful. But regardless, trying to opt out of this is not possible really now. You can be out in the woods, but as soon as you move around, you're going to be affected by all of that. Now, blocking it when you want to talk privately, which is what I talk about all the time with BeReady123.com, using their sat phone bags. You can do that, and you should do that. But and blocking the transmissions so they're not close to your body, having a cover that stops the EMF radiation, that certainly you should do as well. But thinking that you are going to opt out of this by doing a de-Googled phone, by having not a smart TV in your house, is not really practical or realistic. We are behind enemy lines in our own country. We have to turn the claymore. We have to turn their surveillance of us on them, which of course is why I'm always saying be on X. X is an information operation platform. It's an intelligence collection platform as well, but we are turning the claymore very successfully on X there as well. But people don't listen, and a lot of what I say goes over a lot of people's heads, older people's heads in particular. But meanwhile, the visible surveillance layer is an open retreat in America. Flock Safety, the license plate reader network that has become the flashpoint of this year's anti-surveillance backlash, spent last week announcing guardrails, cutting default data retention from 30 days to 7, instituting automatic lockouts for abnormal searches. The company's own justification undercuts the gesture. Flock says more than 90% of searches are complete within 1 week. This comes after a summer of reports of misuse, more than 50 agencies and jurisdictions walking away from the contract since January, and people in multiple states destroying the cameras outright. The ACLU called the changes a thinly veiled PR attempt built largely on hollow security promises, which it is, but we are winning. The resistance is rising. A camera is the least visible object. It sits on a pole. Neighbors notice it. City councils vote on it. And when enough people get angry, it comes down. FLOC needed a decade and roughly 120,000 cameras to cover American roads. The Wi-Fi build-out was surreptitious and clandestine and is already in your home. But that doesn't mean we give up. And that doesn't mean we have lost. That just means we have to take this in a realistic manner, a practical manner. But a lot of people don't want to take it that. They don't want to have a smart TV. They would just want to have a flip phone. They don't want to criticize Trump. They think Trump's playing some kind of 5-dimensional chess or something. Motion sensing sounds like a new piece of intelligence. It is. It's another way to identify somebody. It is. So by the motion is facial recognition, which is on here, right now. They're adding up. AI is adding up all the metrics to determine who that person is, and because intelligence SIGINT is sitting there with law enforcement, and this is going to law enforcement and the intelligence community, NSA, NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, used to be very secret, has more sophisticated hardware than the law enforcement community. That goes back and forth in that regard. Many people are saying, what the flock? Okay. There's a company building flock camera like streetlights. Absolutely terrifying. As the product takes off like flock, since streetlights are already everywhere. Oh yeah, they're like saguaro cactuses in Tucson as well. They're all over the place. But that's the point, and the point I'm making here, that again, I know I'm talking over people's heads at times, so I'm repeating myself for those who are interested, because I see this on Team America all the time. They just don't get what I'm talking about. Is I am not of the redoubt philosophy. I'm not is go up into the mountains and hold out, because you'll be trapped in the mountains. The redoubt is a castle tower. It's where you retreat to, and there are spiral staircases in the castle tower. Do a hypocolor's ad here for Curative Bay while I'm demonstrating this. And you can fight a lot of guys off because it's a spiral staircase. Problem is, if you just keep sending guys, then you're up here and you got no place to go. So I am not a redoubt. That's going to the Rockies. I'm not a redoubt guy. I'm a resistance in plain sight guy, like French resistance, like Polish resistance, like Czechoslovakia resistance. And that applies to the psychological and informational war that is being waged upon us. Ultimate weapon is mind, which is why they're attacking it. Fundamental weapon is body, biological, which is why they're attacking it. They're attacking it from top and the bottom, which again, attacking from the top and the bottom, top and bottom, doesn't really make a lot of sense to have a redoubt philosophy. That's my point of view. And hopefully some people are listening with open minds, but maybe not. I'm just trying to help and use my experience to help others. Anyway, the U.S. is running another stealth operation that is transporting oil through Hormuz. But the big question with this is then how come the crude diesel gap is rising? How come the price of gas is going up? So, take this with a grain of propaganda psyop. The U.S. military has quietly established a shipping corridor in and out of the Strait of Hormuz to transport millions of barrels of oil each day. A notable success, even as the broader war remains a stalemate, two U.S. officials told Axios. This may be, if this is true, this may be the first time the United States is not losing, not necessarily winning, but not losing in this war. Because up till now, we've been losing. Under the operation, which has been underway for the last several weeks, 15 to 20 tankers have entered and exited the strait each night through a southern channel along the coast of Oman. About 10 million barrels of a day, roughly half the pre-war volume, are being transported out of the strait and injected into the global energy market. Why it matters. The U.S.-led operation is mitigating one of the most painful aspects of the war, the disruption to oil supplies that sent crude prices soaring. Translation, trying to keep the prices lower so they can keep running the war. The U.S. military is helping empty tankers enter the Gulf through the strait, pick up oil from countries in the region, and then exit. Obviously, these are not U.S. tankers. We've been controlling the southern lane of the Strait of Hormuz for 2 months now. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard can be a nuisance, but they don't control the strait. We do, said one of the U.S. officials. This isn't Trump, blovicating. This is a more controlled official. The task force overseeing the Hormuz effort is being run out of the Army headquarters in Fort Bragg. Okay, well, that's very telling. So now we're talking about SOCOM and JSOC there. The task force is coordinated. So now we're talking about economic warfare. They're finally using the military for economic warfare as opposed to just bombing more people. So there's some sense coming into the picture here. Remember, I want the U.S. to win. I don't think we should be in the war, but if we are in the war, we should fight it smartly and morally. Task force is coordinating with regional Gulf partners. Okay, well, we're losing regional Gulf partners daily. Everybody's making their own deal because we can't protect them. We cannot protect their bases in their countries. But they create a daily list of ships coming out of the Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz and into the Arabian Sea. Each night, the ships are scheduled to move in on one big outbound line during a certain time slot. Ships then transit through the Southern Channel based on U.S. military guidance. So there's a corridor, probably a geofenced corridor. The U.S. Air Force has fighter jets that protect against Iranian cruise missiles and drones. Zoom in, the operation was made possible by a recent 2-week U.S. Central Command military campaign that degraded Iran's radar and maritime surveillance systems, the officials said. Iran has diminished visibility over the traffic in the southern channel of the strait. Its monitoring is limited to a few radars. It managed to reconstitute as well as spotters and small IRGC fast boats, U.S. officials say. Because the Iranians are mostly blind, they are launching drones and cruise missiles in the general direction of where ships might be transiting. Some ships have been hit by the Iranian attacks, but many were stopped by the U.S. military. Earlier this week, for example, U.S. forces shot down 8 Iranian drones and 2 cruise missiles, one of the officials said. State of play, U.S. officials say that over the past 2 weeks, 15 to 20 tankers transited. Okay, 2 weeks, 15 to 20 tankers is not a lot of tankers coming through there. Average daily exports have been growing, now close to 10 million barrels. I don't think that's a lot. Maybe somebody can tell me that as well. I have published on my Patreon at the Cywarrior level, I believe, the special resource where you can track the ships that are coming through there a while back, patreon.com/Jeffrey Prather. On one of the nights this week, more than 20 ships were slated to move in, with approximately 15 million barrels of oil potentially coming out. Potentially coming out is not coming out. So for the first time, the U.S. May be not losing, but that isn't, not losing is not winning. But they are seemingly engaged in understanding this is economic warfare. They're reacting, though. They do not have the initiative here. And again, the diesel crude gap is still rising. The gas prices are still rising. But it looks like the military has figured out a strategy, and that is we can't control the entire Strait of Hormuz. Too big, too difficult. But if they are moving ships through a space, they can geofence around that space and protect that space, which is kind of what they did, I think, with the rescue of the Wizzo, the weapons systems officer that retired PJ Aaron Love came on and talked about. So this, as this ship moves, there's a geofenced area where the ship is not going to get hit, where they're going to intercept stuff. They can't control everything, but they can control that. That sounds like, that's how I understand it. And maybe I don't understand it right. Maybe somebody can explain it to me better than that. But that's what I think is happening there. So that's good news, because I don't want gas prices to go up. And at the same time, I do not want U.S. troops on the ground. And it's very interesting that it's coming out of Fort Bragg. That means JSOC. Well, that's Bragg, Green Berets, Delta Force. But who else is also there is 2-4, is the Air Force Special Operations, the Special Tactics Squadron. Inside the Special Tactics Squadron are the Combat Air Controllers and the JTAC guys who would manage little airspaces like that. And then there is other special missions units, of which I was in a predecessor move in that area. Years ago, I was in Foreign Operations Group. Later on, that became something else. There's actually an ex-guy on YouTube now that says Intelligence Support Activity, which is no longer what it was called. It wasn't called that in my time. In my time, because the guy was Foreign Intelligence Activity. Before that, back in my day, Foreign Operations Group. But anyway, the capability there is sophisticated SIGINT interception capability of an area that the ship is moving through that then they could defend against. They can't defend and control the whole strait. They just have to control that column. Now, they would have to also do that on the surface of the water, mines, and subsurface as well. So I would think there'd be some kind of submariner capability involved in this as well. But I'm just speculating as I try to understand their PR announcement here. Mike Adams 321 means 3 barrels of crude makes 2 barrels of gas and 1 barrel of diesel. Oh, that's a good point. Yes. Mike's an old friend. We often disagree. He tends to be, I think, a little overly dramatic in areas. But HHS has rescued 137,000 of the 375 kids trafficked under Pedo Joe. And that is good news. And so for my critics who say all I do is badmouth Trump and don't look at the good things, here you go. The biggest child trafficker in the world is the United States government, but RFK Jr. revealed recently that HHS had found 137,000 of the 375,000 kids that were trafficked by Pedo Joe. One guy pretended to be the parent of 42 children. We have no idea what happened to those kids. We're now finding them. We found about 137,000 of them, but a lot of them you just don't find. Why? Well, they're raped to death, used up, organs, organ harvesting. There were about 60 kids who were sent to one address. We looked at the address. It was a container, a steel container in the middle of a parking lot. A lot of them were sent to work at slaughterhouses and picking fruits in the fields as slaves. So we stopped that, and everybody who comes has to validate relationship. We DNA test them. I thought they stopped DNA testing. Can somebody tell me about that? Check on that if they're still doing DNA testing. I thought they stopped that as well. But it's a huge tragedy. My agency under Biden was the single biggest trafficker in the world. RFK of HHS says of HHS. When people tell me they don't like President Trump, I rarely argue with them. What I do say is, so what did you think of Joe Biden? The Biden administration was a catastrophe, pretty much on every level, but perhaps of all the moral collapse over which Biden and his handlers presided. And I would have to agree with that. I would definitely have to agree with that. Things are definitely better under President Trump. Our moral low was under Pedo Joe, but neither was in control. Neither one. It wasn't Biden's FBI and Trump's CIA. It's the other way around. It's the FBI and CIA's running Biden and Trump, the deep state. That's what my point here is, and why we have to keep building the resistance every way we can. So there's also a survey out, and this really now goes to the satanic source of all this, that our culture is being transformed at a pace difficult to comprehend. 72% of men under 30 say they have a positive view of the opposite gender, compared with just 50% of women of the same age. 38% of men say they feel very positively towards women, while only 18% of women say the same about men. This trend is particularly pronounced among women under 25, of whom just 35% feel positively towards men. It's interesting because, when we moved, I went to a female-owned gym, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to start a martial arts class here. I'll teach a lady self-defense class." And she turned me down. And she was a lady who had been abused. And what I said to my wife and girls was, she can't distinguish between a good male guy, and a bad male guy, because she was always hanging out with the other types. And that's an anecdotal story, but this seems to be bearing that out. Now, this survey was conducted in the United Kingdom, but I'm sure it would have produced similar results conducted in the United States. Well, that's debatable. UK is really small, or England's really small. It depends on where you were doing this. I think Texas, Oklahoma versus New York, Massachusetts, for example. But if you think about why this is happening, it is, again, happening purposefully. It is satanically sourced via powers and principalities, through executives that have sold themselves out, literally, to demons and the devil. Men are almost always villains in our movies and television show. When a family is depicted on screen, it's almost always the father that is the problem, or the weak. And the commercials are just always like this. Even in our commercials, men and women are characterized very differently and distinctly. Once you become aware of this phenomenon, and I point this out to my kids all the time, you will literally see it everywhere. The thin veneer of our civilization is disintegrating all around us. That's a terrible thing. According to the same poll, 23% of U.S. adults under the age of 30 now identify as LGBTQ. I saw this happen with kids that grew up in my dojo, and their parents were kind of hippies. They were not Christians. They liked my initiation program because it was Indian, but they did not like my chaplaincy. And so they did not give their kids a solid moral upbringing. So young adults are far more likely than older adults to identify as LGBTQ plus. 23% of adults under 30 and 10% of adults aged 30 to 49 are identifying as that. So those are staggering numbers of what is happening. And I saw firsthand little kids that I trained from when they were little growing up. Then, the son, multiple suicide attempts, the daughter, trannied and in obvious constant pain, and the parents just going along with it, more concerned about their ponytails and parenting. So the percentage of U.S. adults under the age of 30 identifying as LGBTQ plus, which is, I hate this, is not just a trend, it's a tsunami. Only 11.4% of men under the age of 30 identify as such, but 31% of women. It's not an accident, because who has the babies? Well, according to them, either. But of course, this is about women. And then they're calling themselves bisexuals now, and heteroflex is the new term. That is, some heteros are attracted to the same sex at different times. And they're saying there are like 50 million heteroflexibles out there, which, again, I don't believe. I think this is planned. I think this, just like everything else, is planned. But according to these findings, heteroflexibility is growing, with a skyrocketing by 193% over the past years. Young adults are, of course, the future of our society. That's why I always tell my kid students, you're my most important students. You just came from God, and you're the future. But the source of this is satanic, because the adversary cannot get back at the creator. The adversary is out of heaven, kicked out of heaven. And so he can rage at the creator, but he cannot get to the creator. He can only get to the creator's creatures in the creation. And that is what is happening here. And this violates the first commandment, be fruitful and multiply. So if you got all the women pretending they're lesbians and they're guys, then they are not around men. They're going to be miserable and unhappy, and they're not going to have kids. They're going to be even more miserable, unhappy without kids. This is a plan. So if you read the Haggadah, which is the handbook for the Seder, the order of the Pesach, the Passover, of the Karaites, which are the Hebrews that don't use rabbis and don't read the Talmud, they just read the Torah, period. In that handbook, Pharaoh says, for the Egyptian midwives helping Hebrew women birth, you can birth the girl children, you should strangle the boy children. Why? Because they can then take them over. That's what we're seeing over and over and over in this. And this is what all this is about. This is what all this tranny stuff is about, this mutilation. When you turn a boy into a girl, then he is impotent. When you turn a girl into a boy, she is infertile. And therefore you destroy the creation and dismantle the first commandment, be fruitful and multiply. And also getting to know each other and the difficulties. My wife and I still, we have one of the best marriages ever. I tell my girls this all the time, is you rarely see such a good marriage, but we work at it really hard. My wife works at it particularly hard and has taught me so much about that. But there's so much joy in a great marriage and in a great family, but that is almost never portrayed. Most of the teenagers you see are resentful and angry and flippant to their parents, which my teenage daughter never is. Never. She's more mature than most adults around, because that's our family life, that we enjoy and do everything together. But that's not what is being promoted out there. It is being perverted. And that's very important to understand. Jason Floppy, U.S. food supplies being poisoned, trackdoc.com. Okay. I don't know that one. I'll take a look at that as well. And there's also finally a story about U.S. bases being dangerously equipped to crush drone swarm attacks. I've long suspected this, but now there's a story about it. American military bases remain dangerously vulnerable to swarms of small, inexpensive drone swarms. Army Lieutenant General Jared warned that domestic installations are currently ill-equipped to stop the kind of coordinated drone strikes already being used around the world. He serves as Deputy Commander of the U.S. Northern Command and Vice Commander of the American Contingent of North American Aerospace Defense Command. And I think this is a huge problem. This might be spam. Okay. Thank you, John. Yes, that's spam. The guy's not for real. All right. Sorry about that. Yep. Well, it must be important what I'm saying. So I've talked about this. I've wanted to talk about this for quite some time. And I've contacted firms that supply anti-IR and thermal drone ghillie suits. And they kind of hemmed and hawed, and they just won't come on. Because I fear that the U.S. troops that may deploy very soon to Iran or to Turkey or whatever are ill-prepared and ill-equipped for that. And they also don't have TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures for dealing with drone warfare. There's just a couple YouTube videos out of that. And this one Lioness episode did show that. But again, I am not a fan at all of that. Are there females in SMUs, Special Mission Units? Yes, they are. But is their job to pretend like they're skinny little arms in their tank shirts along with the pipe hitters kicking the door? No, that's not their job at all. And I can tell you, because I've done it, is it's walking around the city with a guy or sitting on surveillance someplace with a guy, because a guy and a gal out in the middle of nowhere is a lot less suspicious than two guys out there as well. Not that they're not shooters, not that they're not studettes. They are, and they're world-class athletes as well. I've known the first of them. I don't know them now, but I knew the first of them to be in there. But the way it's portrayed in Lioness is certainly not realistic. Also, the way she yells at everybody, you don't get much done by yelling at people and saying, I outrank you. My CIA rank outranks you. Because in SOCOM, the CIA does not have that great a reputation. At least That's my perception from my day. I see a lot of these guys talking, yeah, I was CIA ground branch, and now you see some of them. I think this Bustamante guy being outed or something. I'm always much more proud of my military service in special operations than in intelligence service, and I think most of those guys are as well. But that is there is one more thing. Massachusetts just passed a law allowing for the killing of unborn babies right up until the moment of birth. So pray for Massachusetts, because God will not stand for that. And female governor and women praising this. This is bald. This is totally evil. This is satanic. Even some Democrats are protesting this. And this Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey will have to answer for that. That's why I'm saying rejecting revenge. Revenge is the Lord's, not mine. But you will have to answer for allowing all the children to be killed like that. So again, I was going to have Bud Malmstrom on. He's the founding father of American Bujinkan, my martial art, but he couldn't figure out the technical aspects. He's a pretty old guy at this point. Tried to get Chad Balwant's back on. I think he didn't want to do that anymore. He was also doing some cool high-speed stuff as well. So sorry about that. See what I can do with that and see if we can make that happen. I don't know. And let me know how you like the intro, because I think it's pretty cool to go back to the original Taken intro. And remember that history portrays the founders as gentlemen farmers at best and slave owners at worst. But to a man, they were first and foremost fierce. Franklin, the Playboy polymath, wrote, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." Washington carried the Book of Psalms. The Declaration begins with God, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator, and ends with God, with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. De Tocqueville said, "American Revolution ended in liberty, but the French in tyranny, because Americans embraced Christianity and France suppressed it." The same happened in the Mexican, when churches were burned and priests hanged, resulting in the Cristeros War and their famous battle cry, "Viva Cristo Rey." Freedom requires ferocity. Ferocity is sustained by fortitude. Fortitude is founded on faith. Faith begets morality. Morality inspires virtue. Republic requires a virtuous populace. Virtue originates from religion. Religion is creature comprehending creator, and the connection to the creator is the Christ.